You seriously can't just do this one thing for me? My brother, Adam, crossed his arms over his chest, tilting his head slightly, wearing that same patronizing look he had perfected over the years, the one that made it clear he thought I was being completely unreasonable for daring to hesitate. That's what family does, you know. We help each other. His voice was coated in condescension, like he was speaking to a child throwing a tantrum, not his fully grown, financially independent, adult sister who had every right to say no. I had barely even answered the phone before he launched into his request. No, not request, because requests involve giving someone the option to decline. This was an expectation, one he had already decided I would agree to, one he had apparently not even considered the possibility of me refusing. He had called me with the same energy someone might have if they were simply confirming a delivery or checking on a reservation, as if my time, my life, and my priorities were secondary to whatever he and his wife had planned for themselves. I exhaled slowly, gripping my phone a little tighter, already knowing exactly where this conversation was going. Wait, just to be clear, I said, keeping my voice as neutral as possible, you're asking me to watch all 3 kids. For free. For 2 full weeks. While you and Lauren go on vacation. There was a brief pause, just long enough for me to hear the barely contained irritation in his sigh. Yeah, Claire, he said, dragging out my name like I was being deliberately obtuse. We've been planning this for months. It's our 10-year anniversary, and we really just need the time away, you know? A break. Some time to unwind. I figured you of all people would understand that. I of all people. Right. Because as far as Adam was concerned, my life was an endless stretch of free time, completely devoid of responsibilities, just waiting for someone, him, specifically, to come along and give it purpose. Because I wasn't married, because I didn't have kids, because I worked from home and didn't have a boss breathing down my neck, he had somehow decided that meant my time was open for the taking. I pressed my fingers to my temple, already feeling the headache creeping in. Adam, I love my nieces and nephew, you know I do, but oh my God, he groaned, cutting me off before I could finish. It's not that hard, Claire. They're not babies, you won't have to do everything for them. And it's family, for crying out loud. It's not like we're asking a stranger to do it. I closed my eyes for a second, steadying myself before responding, because if there was one thing Adam was good at, it was making me feel like the unreasonable one. I get that, but 2 weeks is a lot, Adam. That's a full-time job, plus overtime, and I have my own commitments. I can't just drop everything and play nanny while you 2 go sip cocktails on the beach. There was a long silence on the other end of the line, and I knew that was the exact moment he had decided I was the problem. Not the fact that he had planned an entire child-free luxury vacation without figuring out childcare first. Not the fact that he had assumed I would rearrange my entire schedule to accommodate his needs. No, the problem, in his mind, was me, selfish, unhelpful, unwilling to sacrifice for family me. He let out a sharp, humorless laugh. Wow. Okay. Wow. So that's how it is, huh? I braced myself. Here it comes. I just don't get how you can be so selfish sometimes, Claire, he said, his voice dripping with disappointment, as if I had just admitted to kicking a puppy. You don't even have kids, you don't have anyone depending on you, you don't have any real obligations. What do you even do with your time? Sit around at home all day. I gritted my teeth, staring at the wall, gripping the phone so tightly I thought it might crack. It was amazing how quickly he had shifted from asking me for a favor to attacking me for not immediately complying. I work, Adam, I said, my voice clipped. Just because I don't have an office to go to doesn't mean I'm not busy. Oh, please, he scoffed, clearly unimpressed. You work for yourself, you make your own schedule. What's stopping you from pushing a few things around so you can actually help your family for once? For once. As if I hadn't spent years being the reliable one, the flexible one, the one who picked up the slack when he and Lauren needed a break. As if I hadn't already sacrificed weekends, rearranged my own plans, and put my own priorities on the back burner more times than I could count. But now, the one time I said no, suddenly I was the selfish one. I can't do it, Adam, I said firmly, no longer interested in sugarcoating my refusal. I'm not available. Another long pause. Then a low, condescending chuckle. "You'll change your mind," he said, with the kind of infuriating confidence that made my blood boil. "You always do." I clenched my jaw, biting back every sharp response that was sitting on the tip of my tongue, every frustrated "not this time," every sarcastic "we'll see about that." Because I already knew the truth, Adam expected me to cave, because that's what I had always done before. He had spent his entire life assuming that his needs would always come first, that family meant his family, that his problems became everyone else's responsibility, while mine were barely worth acknowledging. And that was fine, because I already knew exactly how this was going to play out. I just had to wait. It didn't take long for word to spread, because in my family, no disagreement ever stayed private for more than a day before morphing into a full-scale intervention, complete with unsolicited advice, thinly veiled guilt trips, and the kind of emotional manipulation that made you question whether standing your ground was even worth the effort. It was a skill my mother had perfected over the years, always managing to present her disappointment in a way that sounded gentle and reasonable, as if she was simply trying to help me become a better person instead of pushing me toward whatever outcome she had already decided was the correct one. I should have seen it coming the second I hung up on Adam, because if there was one thing he was good at, it was making sure he never had to fight his own battles alone. Instead of accepting my decision like an adult, he had obviously gone straight to our parents, spinning some dramatic version of events where I was the cruel, ungrateful sister who had selfishly refused to help him in his greatest time of need, completely ignoring all the times I had dropped everything for him before. The first call came less than 24 hours later, my mother's voice soft and sweet, laced with that careful concern that always made me brace for whatever was coming next. "I just talked to Adam," she said, as if she had casually stumbled upon this conversation instead of dialing my number with the explicit purpose of discussing it. "He mentioned you told him you couldn't watch the kids, and I just wanted to check in and make sure everything's okay." I sighed, pinching the bridge of my nose, already exhausted. "Everything's fine, Mom," I said, knowing full well that no answer would be enough to satisfy her until I gave her the one she wanted to hear. There was a slight pause, just long enough for her disappointment to settle in before she continued. "I just think. I mean, Claire, he's your brother," she said, as if I might have somehow forgotten. "And you know how much they've been looking forward to this trip. They never get time away together, and you're really the only one who can help. It's just what siblings do, sweetheart." That phrase, "what siblings do," was a familiar one, a well-worn tool that had been used in my family for as long as I could remember. It was never spoken in an outright demand, never framed as a command, but instead presented as an undeniable truth, a simple fact of life that only a heartless person would dare to argue against. I had heard it when I was 16 and Adam had needed help with his math homework, even though he had spent the entire day making fun of me in front of his friends. I had heard it when I was 23 and he needed a ride to a job interview after blowing all his money on a weekend trip to Vegas. I had heard it when I was 29 and he needed a loan because his car had broken down, even though he still hadn't paid me back for the previous 2 times I had helped him. And now, at 38, I was hearing it again, because apparently, what siblings do always meant what Claire does for Adam, never the other way around. I forced a smile, even though my mother couldn't see it, keeping my voice calm and pleasant. "I know they've been looking forward to it, Mom, but I never said I would do it." He assumed. Another pause, this one longer, heavier, like she was trying to decide how much further she wanted to push. "I just think," she finally said, carefully, "that maybe you're being a little stubborn about this. It wouldn't kill you to be nice." And there it was, the classic move, the subtle implication that by standing my ground, I wasn't just making a decision for myself, but actively choosing to be unkind. That I wasn't simply setting a boundary, but instead punishing Adam for no reason other than my own selfishness. I wanted to argue, wanted to remind her of all the times I had already been nice, of all the times I had done exactly what was expected of me, of all the times Adam had taken and taken without ever once considering what I might need in return. But I knew how this game worked, and I knew that no matter how valid my reasons were, the only thing my mother would hear was that I was refusing to help my brother. So instead, I simply hummed in response, neither agreeing nor disagreeing, offering just enough sound to make her believe I was thinking about it. The conversation ended soon after, but I knew it wasn't over, not really. And sure enough, less than a day later, my father called. Now, my father was a man of few words, the kind of person who rarely involved himself in family drama unless it directly affected him. He had always been the quieter parent, the one who let my mother handle the emotional labor of managing relationships. But when he did speak, his words carried weight, even when they weren't particularly long-winded. "Hey, kiddo," he greeted me, his voice casual, like he was about to ask about the weather. "Your mom told me about the thing with Adam." I sighed. "Oh, did she?" My father chuckled, low and knowing. "Look, I'm not getting in the middle of this," he said, which was always exactly what someone said when they were about to get in the middle of something. "But you know, it wouldn't kill you to help out. They're family." I inhaled slowly, staring at the ceiling, willing myself to stay calm. "It also wouldn't kill Adam to make sure he has childcare before booking a vacation," I said, my voice deceptively light. There was a beat of silence, and I could practically hear my father shrug through the phone. "Guess that's true," he admitted. "But you know how he is." And that was the problem, wasn't it? We all knew how Adam was. We had always known. And instead of holding him accountable, instead of ever making him face the consequences of his own entitlement, the family had just adjusted around it, bending whenever necessary, making room for his irresponsibility like it was an immovable force of nature instead of something he had chosen to be. I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I didn't defend myself or list all the reasons why this expectation was unreasonable. I just let my father talk, let my mother sigh, let Adam continue believing that I was the weak link in this equation, that I would inevitably crumble under the weight of family pressure like I always had before. Because that was the best part. I already knew he had booked the tickets. And now, I was just waiting for the right moment to tell him exactly what I had planned for that week. The trick was simple: don't argue, don't push back, don't give him anything to latch onto. Just let him assume, let him believe, let him build up his own false sense of certainty until he had no choice but to fall straight into the trap he had set for himself. So that's exactly what I did. I stopped fighting, I stopped explaining, and I stopped giving him anything concrete to work with. Instead, I simply let him talk, let him work himself deeper into his own fantasy, let him convince himself that I was, as always, going to fold under the weight of his expectations. The first few days after our argument, Adam didn't reach out, most likely giving me time to cool off, which, in his mind, meant giving me time to come to my senses and realize that, of course, I was going to do this for him. That was the thing about my brother: he didn't believe in no when it came for me. He didn't believe in boundaries, not when they inconvenienced him, and he certainly didn't believe I had any real ability to stand firm when he applied the right amount of pressure. But the funniest part? He never even asked again. He didn't follow up, didn't check in, didn't try to persuade me further. He simply assumed that my silence meant I had given up, that my refusal was temporary, that I was quietly preparing to accept my role as his unpaid, overworked, completely unappreciated babysitter. He had already decided I would do it, so why bother asking for confirmation? I saw the proof of that assumption everywhere, especially in the way he started talking about their vacation as if it was set in stone, bragging to anyone who would listen about the incredible trip they had planned, throwing out details about the oceanfront suite, the all-inclusive meals, the couple's spa treatments, all with that smug certainty that only came from someone who had never once considered the possibility of things not working out exactly how he imagined. At Sunday dinner, just a week after our argument, I sat across from him at my parents' house, picking at my food while he talked about his upcoming getaway like it was already a done deal. "We got a hell of a deal on the resort," he said, grinning as he scrolled through pictures on his phone, flashing them across the table as if we were supposed to be impressed. 15 days in paradise. No work, no stress, just sun, drinks, and peace. I cannot wait. "Lauren, sitting beside him, laughed as she refilled her wine glass, shaking her head in exaggerated relief. "Oh my God, you have no idea how much we need this," she added, leaning into Adam's shoulder. "It's been forever since we had a real vacation, and with 3 kids, you can imagine how crazy life gets. We're just so lucky we have family to help out." She shot me a pointed smile over the rim of her glass, as if we were sharing some inside joke, as if I had already agreed, as if I was just sitting there, quietly accepting my role as their free childcare provider while they indulged in 15 days of uninterrupted luxury. I could have said something. I could have corrected them right then and there, could have told them in no uncertain terms that they were about to have a very expensive problem on their hands when they finally realized they had no one to watch their kids. But I didn't, because that wasn't the plan. The plan was patience. The plan was waiting. The plan was letting them believe they had already won. Adam had always been like this, had always operated under the assumption that his needs came first, that everyone else would adjust, that his problems became our problems while ours remained solely our own. I had lost count of how many times I had been put in this exact position before, always expected to clean up after his messes, always expected to accommodate him without hesitation, always expected to sacrifice without complaint. I thought back to the time he had needed to borrow money years ago, back when I was still naive enough to believe he actually intended to pay me back. He had called in a panic, his voice dripping with desperation, spinning a story about how he had hit a rough patch and just needed a little help to get through the month. I had wired him over $1,000 without a second thought, convinced that he was genuinely struggling. But, of course, I later found out that he had used the money for concert tickets, a new gaming console, and a weekend trip with his friends. And when I finally confronted him, he had laughed. He had laughed in my face and told me, "Come on, Claire, you make good money. You don't need it back." I had learned my lesson that day. And now, as I sat at that dinner table, watching Adam and Lauren talk about their tropical paradise, watching them sip wine and bask in their own entitlement, watching them act as if I had already agreed to every single part of this ridiculous arrangement, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. This was going to be so much better than getting my $1,000 back. I waited. I let them book the flights, let them choose the fanciest resort, let them plan their spa days and snorkeling excursions, let them put down a non-refundable deposit that cost more than my monthly rent. I let them talk and talk and talk, let them gush about how excited they were, let them walk further and further into the exact trap they had set for themselves. And then, just a few days later, once everything was locked in, once they had paid in full, once they had fully committed, I sent a single text. "Oh, by the way, I have plans that week." I could almost hear the panic through the phone. The reaction came faster than I expected, almost as if Adam had been sitting by his phone, ready and waiting, convinced that any moment now, I'd come to my senses and tell him what he wanted to hear. Instead, what he got was a text that shattered the smug little fantasy he had built in his head, leaving him scrambling for answers he should have had before locking himself into a non-refundable, extravagant getaway. First, it was the texts rapid fire, one after the other, each more desperate than the last. "Wait. What? What do you mean you have plans? You never said that before. Claire. Call me." The calls came next. 3 in a row, then 4, then 5, my phone buzzing angrily on the kitchen counter while I stood at my sink, casually sipping coffee, watching the chaos unfold in real time without feeling the slightest bit of guilt. I let the calls go unanswered, let the panic settle in, let him sit in the uncertainty of his own making, knowing full well that every passing minute only added to his growing anxiety. Then, after what must have been the longest 10 minutes of Adam's life, came the voicemail. I put him on speaker, leaning back against my counter, folding my arms as his voice, sharp and strained, spilled through my kitchen, a barely contained mixture of disbelief, frustration, and sheer entitlement. "Claire, are you freaking kidding me right now? You knew we had this planned. You knew we were counting on you. What the hell do you mean you have plans? Why wouldn't you say something sooner? Why would you wait until now to drop this on us? I swear, you are so unbelievably selfish sometimes. Just call me back. We need to fix this." Now, I smiled. There it was. Not a single moment of self-reflection, not an ounce of accountability, not even a shred of acknowledgement that he had assumed I would sacrifice my time without so much as a conversation. Just pure, unfiltered rage that his own carelessness had finally come back to bite him. I waited another 10 minutes before responding, taking my time, enjoying the rare pleasure of watching Adam feel powerless for once in his life. Then, when I was sure he had stewed in his own frustration long enough, I sent a text. Sorry. Thought I told you. Have fun though. The silence that followed was deafening. For about an hour, I didn't hear anything, which meant Adam was either pacing his house, trying to figure out his next move, or already on the phone with Lauren, frantically trying to come up with a solution that didn't involve admitting he had been wrong. Then, right on cue, Lauren entered the chat. Her text was exactly what I expected, passive-aggressive, polished, just condescending enough to make it clear she believed I was in the wrong without outright saying it. Hey Claire. Just wanted to reach out because Adam is really upset and, honestly, we're both a little confused. We really thought we could count on you for this, and it's just really disappointing to hear otherwise. I know you're busy, but this is family, you know? Anyway, I'm sure we can figure something out. Let's talk soon. I didn't respond. Instead, I let my phone sit untouched on my counter, let them both sit with the uncomfortable realization that they had never actually confirmed anything with me. Let them process the fact that they had built this entire vacation on assumptions and expectations rather than actual conversations. And the best part? Our parents, who had originally taken Adam's side, who had so sweetly nudged me to just be nice, were now realizing the truth. It started with a simple call from my mother that evening, her voice hesitant, her words carefully chosen, no longer carrying that same guilt-laced tone from before. Sweetheart, she said, almost cautiously, Adam called us earlier. He seemed really upset. I hummed, waiting for her to get to the point. She sighed, like she wasn't sure she wanted to say it. Did you ever actually tell him you were going to watch the kids? I grinned. There it was. The cracks were forming. I kept my voice as neutral as possible, keeping any trace of satisfaction far away from my words. No, Mom. I didn't. I told him I couldn't. Another sigh, heavier this time. And he just assumed you would anyway? Yep, I said, popping the P for emphasis. A long pause. Then, finally, the thing I had been waiting for. Well, she murmured, as if she was only just now putting the pieces together. I suppose that is his own fault, isn't it? I almost laughed. The shift was happening. Adam was losing control of the narrative. And then, just when I thought it couldn't get any better, my phone buzzed again with a new text from him, one last, desperate attempt to salvage what was left of his doomed vacation. Fine. We'll pay you. Just name your price. Oh, Adam. You have no idea how much this is going to cost you. I let Adam's last text sit unanswered for a little while, just long enough to let him wonder if maybe, just maybe, he had found the magic words that would finally make me cave. He had burned through every other tactic already, manipulation, guilt, outright anger. So now he had resorted to something he had never tried before, actually offering to pay me. The thought alone was almost amusing, because I knew he wasn't offering out of fairness or respect for my time. He was offering because he was desperate, because he had backed himself into a corner, because he had assumed for so long that I was his safety net and was now flailing wildly without one. So I took my time. I made myself a cup of tea, curled up on my couch, and watched an entire episode of my favorite show before finally picking up my phone, smiling slightly as I typed my response. Oh, I'd love to help. My rate is $40 an hour. I hit send. And then, just because I wanted to make absolutely sure he understood the reality of what he had asked me to do for free, I followed up with another text, laying it out as clearly as possible. Since it's 3 kids, full-time care, overnight supervision, and 2 full weeks, that comes out to about $10,000. Let me know if you want to send a deposit. The silence that followed was beautiful. No instant rebuttal. No immediate rant. No flood of texts demanding an explanation. Just nothing. A quiet void where his smug entitlement had once been. A perfect, echoing pause that told me he had finally realized just how badly he had screwed himself over. And then my phone rang. I answered casually, placing him on speakerphone, leaning back into my couch with a sigh of absolute contentment. "Hey, Adam," I greeted, as if I didn't already know exactly why he was calling. "What the hell is wrong with you?" His voice came through the speaker, not as controlled or as measured as before, but unfiltered, raw, and furious. "Are you seriously trying to charge me 10 grand? You're joking, right? Please tell me you're joking." I took a sip of my tea, letting a bead of silence pass before responding. "Oh, I thought family doesn't charge family?" I said sweetly, throwing his own words back at him, savoring the way I could practically hear his blood pressure rising through the phone. "But if you've changed your mind and now understand that babysitting for 2 weeks is actual work, then yeah, I'd be happy to do it. For my rate." "This is insane, Claire," he snapped, his voice cracking slightly. "Nobody pays that much for a babysitter. You're being ridiculous." I shrugged, even though he couldn't see me. "Oh, I don't know, Adam," I mused, tilting my head slightly. "That's actually the going rate for professional childcare providers, especially for multiple kids over an extended period of time. But hey, if that's too expensive for you, maybe you should look into other options." "I don't have other options, Claire," he barked, his frustration reaching its peak. "That's the whole damn point. Our vacation is in a week. What the hell are we supposed to do now?" I smiled into my tea. That was his problem, not mine. I didn't answer. And for a moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, he was finally going to accept defeat. But then came Lauren. She must have been standing right next to him, because suddenly, I heard her voice in the background, sharp and dripping with condescension, speaking at me rather than to me. "You know, Claire, I really don't understand why you're doing this," she said, as if she were speaking to a petulant child rather than a grown woman. "We've always done so much for you. I mean, we never ask for anything, and the one time we do, you turn it into some kind of power trip." I exhaled through my nose, already bored. "Lauren, I don't remember asking you for anything," I said, voice even, unimpressed. "But I do remember you and Adam assuming I would drop everything to babysit for free, booking a vacation without confirming, and then gaslighting me when I said no." Lauren scoffed. "Oh, come on, Claire. It's not that big of a deal." I grinned. "Then it shouldn't be that big of a deal to find another babysitter," I said smoothly, watching the seconds tick by on the screen, wondering just how long it would take before they both realized there was absolutely nothing they could say to change my mind. Adam made a frustrated sound, as if he was about to launch into another argument, but I didn't give him the chance. "Well, this has been fun," I said, stretching my legs out, completely at ease. "But I have things to do. Good luck figuring out your babysitting situation. Bye, Adam." And with that, I ended the call. I turned off my phone, tossed it onto the couch beside me, and let out a slow, satisfied sigh, because for once, I wasn't the one scrambling to fix his problems. For once, I wasn't the one being taken advantage of. For once, Adam was dealing with the consequences of his choices. And the best part? There was nothing he could do about it. Because funny enough, the people who scream the loudest about family obligations are always the ones who offer the least in return.